Well, let's meet our wisdom keepers for 2023. I'm Dan Cummings, and with me are Stan Lindhorst and Mary Nelson. The silver anniversary theme this year of Focus Greater Syracuse is in fact raising voices in our community, and these two individuals, as your wisdom keepers for 2023, have spent their careers, their lives really, among us, raising the voices of others. Stan Lindhorst, welcome. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, Dan. Good to see you.
You bet. And Mary Nelson?
Thank you, Dan. Good to see you again as well.
Well, a few weeks ago, I was on my way to church down the street, and I could hardly get around all the roadblocks and the police barricades because you had thousands of kids at your youth backpack giveaway. We're going to go more on that in a minute.
Yes,
but
thank you.
I tell you, there's a reason. Obviously, you're both here as wisdom keepers and as people who have raised voices, both with your long and wonderful newspaper career, Stan, and Mary with you, the Mary Nelson Youth Center. But this didn't just start yesterday. You didn't just start doing these things and raising people's voices 2 minutes ago. Mary, I know that your story really took a dramatic turn and brought you to where you are today more than 20 years ago. Tell me about that catalyzing moment in your life.
My moment really started in 2001. We were on a family vacation. My nephew is my firstborn nephew. I was very close to him. He went out one night to take his little brother to Burger King, and his best friend called him. And he detoured to go pick up his best friend. Best friend was going through something, and I can't even say exactly at that moment what was going on, but he shot my nephew 6 times. 5 bullets hit him. For this to happen, it took a big toll on our family. It caused division. I could have stayed stuck. I could have stayed stuck to the point where let this control my life. But I took that tragedy and created something positive. After being home one day, called in sick to work, told my boss I wasn't feeling good, to see a young kid in my neighborhood running from the police.
Why did you realize almost immediately that you needed to do something different with your life at that point?
When that young boy was on my fence, and I asked him, 12 o'clock noon, why you're not in school? This young man told me he graduated. Graduate from what? He said, high school. I'm trying to go to college. I'm trying to make money to buy my books. I said, you're going to jail today, but you may want to look out for On Point for college. They help young men just like you and young girls just like you to get what they need for school.
Stan Lindhorst, let me bring you into this conversation. People know you as the 39-year veteran of the Syracuse newspapers before your retirement just this summer, but your journalism career didn't start in Syracuse, did it? It started in the Midwest.
Yeah, well, I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, very rural. Well, Mary's family were migrators, mine were tenant farmers, and the arrival of the daily newspaper was an important thing. So I got into journalism. I saw how valuable and important it was, and I started writing in the 1960s as a high schooler for the County Seat Weekly about my high school, and that sort of launched my career. And then with a few intermediate stops, I moved here in 1984 from San Diego and became the editor in charge of local news here.
And you've taken it so much further than that, but related to Mary's story that she just told about what turned her life around and has turned the lives subsequently of thousands of families in the city around. As a newspaper reporter, editor, the story that Mary just told about the violent death of her nephew was not a rare occurrence in Syracuse, and unfortunately still isn't to this day. And your job was to both report on and assign and edit other reporters to cover that type of news, which became way too common in our city, didn't it?
Right, and I think that's part of the importance of good journalism, is not to just report on what had happened as if it's somehow salacious. It's what are the root causes? Why are we here? And who are the people like Mary who are helping find solutions to that? And what can we as a community do to support them? That, I think, is an important part of the work we did, and why I think we gave voice to so many people during my career that helped support that kind of work.
What was it that, again, brought you from just a news story? Your family was just another news story for Stan's newspaper one day, and yet now you're making the news because of what you're doing in the community all year round.
Well, you know, the light bulb went off in my head when that young man said he's making money to buy his books. I went back in my house, and the then mayor then, I wrote a letter and said, if I were to do an event for kids, would you attend? He responded 2 weeks later, and that was my first event. My nephew, we buried him June 4th, and my first event was in August of the same year. And I can remember I had $3.75 in my pocket, no sponsorship, no nothing. I was going from car to car, putting flyers on and saying, you know, let's come together, be here for you. Let's not lose another one. Let's not do this. And the first year I had 850 kids and their parents. You have to understand also, you can help our kids in our community, but you have to get to the root of the foundation.
Yeah, that's what Stan just said. You got to shine the light on
Yeah.
what's the root causes of these
Yes,
problems. And I guess, Stan, that's part of what you're talking about when you say journalism goes way beyond just telling the runs, hits, and errors of today's tragedies, good news, bad news. It's to try to find out how the community can react and make it better.
Right. You want to shine a spotlight on people like Mary who are doing something positive, who are giving of themselves, who are making our community better, who are making change like Mary has done, and helping to give students and young people opportunity, showing them the way. I think that's an important part of what I did throughout my career. One of the things, for example, the theme this year is giving voice. We, in the 1980s and 90s, started a magazine called HJ Magazine. And in it, we hired high school kids to write news about their high schools for us and explain what was going on. And I think it was very popular, but it helped these kids give their voice to the community and for the community to hear something important from them.
You must have made a conscious decision, perhaps you and other editors, to make sure that the Syracuse newspapers took their journalism in that direction, to make sure it was results-oriented as much as you could be, right? That was an evolution that I'm not sure people give you enough credit for.
Well, I don't know if I deserve any credit there. I've had the good fortune in my career of working with a lot of smart, dedicated, creative people who cared a lot about this community and still do. One of the things, though, when you're talking about that is if you give people a voice and their ideas can be shared, and if you're open to hearing different ideas, different viewpoints, and not excluding them, that will make our community better. You know, when I came here in '84, you could see this community had a lot of potential. I don't think a lot of people thought so at the time, but over the years they've come to realize that and see how it could be. And partly that's by listening to younger people, people who have come from the outside, giving new kinds of people a voice that maybe weren't heard traditionally, whether it's people of color, whether it's women, young people, immigrants. Once you listen to the people with new ideas, you can begin to make your community better.
I love what you just said.
Oh, well, thank you.
Putting that voice, putting that voice out there, you know, you got good writing, good social media, not bad reporting. We got to report the good sometime too.
All the time.
We see the bad.
Right.
We know the bad is there. But not suppressing our young people's voices, letting their voices be heard.
You're listening to these kids, you're giving them a voice to you. How have you been able to raise their voice? The young people and their families that you've heard from, who have told you their stories, are you able to get their stories out?
I learned to listen. I learned to listen, not to respond, just to listen. Once you start listening and hearing what they got to say, you can learn a lot by listening. I could sit here and talk stuff all day long, but if I'm not listening to what you're saying, and suppressing their voices, because they could save my life.
Sure.
Young kids hear and know more than we ever thought we did know. We have to listen, not suppress their voices.
Can I ask you what kind of stories you've heard? I can't have you tell me thousands of stories because you've changed tens of thousands of young lives, but for instance, at your most recent backpack giveaway, you know, in late August here, this year.
This annual backpack giveaway, I prepared for their going back to school. So now I'm gonna sit back. I don't have to get on stage stand and thank everybody for being here. I can look around and see the fruit of my labor, what has happened, what has become. To hear these young kids saying to me, thank you, Miss Mary, for helping my mom. Because my mom had to pay the rent and buy us some food she didn't have enough money to get us what we needed for school, and new shoes and new sneakers and new clothes and underwear and t-shirts.
The encouragement that comes from that could ignite perhaps a whole turnaround for these families, perhaps in a very tangible way, that encouragement that you give them just by making their lives easier right now, and the smile on your face when you do it, probably has ripple effects that you cannot even measure over the last 2 decades.
You can't imagine a smile on my face, how my heart is smiling. When I could look out there and see our babies. It's not just my race. It's only one race, the human race. I don't look at black, white, or Puerto Rican in those colors. I look at we all the same. We all bleed the same. When I see my families out there, I see nothing but love. And I want people to understand this. I am not able to do none of that without my community. My community get behind me and they give me that push.
And yet, Stan, we know that the voices of color that she referred to, yeah, we're all in the human race, but for so long, too long, the voices of blacks and Hispanics and Native Americans were not heard, including in this community, probably as when you arrived in '84, these stories were not being told sufficiently.
I think the leadership of the paper was changing it enough then that they could be heard, but you're right, for generations, decades, people of color, anyone who wasn't white and in a position of power as a male, probably wasn't being heard. Their stories weren't being asked about. They didn't have that kind of influence. And I think when that changes, then you can begin to get better. You can grow. And I think it's important if we look back at our history and see who is excluded throughout history in all of the things, all of life of Syracuse, and how people were corralled into either one place or one idea or not allowed to have opportunity. That's when we can see all the problems that developed back then and how they continue to be manifested today.
Stan, in his semi-retirement of the past couple of years, has continued to write until his retirement this summer a regular column in the paper on leadership. You interviewed Mary several years ago as community leaders, corporate leaders, education leaders who have something, a voice to share with us about leadership.
I wanted to give a voice to people so that our community knew there were smart leaders in our community who could help move us forward. And they weren't always the newsmakers at the time. In fact, I kind of steered away from those who were the traditional newsmakers, you know. But it was great to hear from them and understand their love for Syracuse, their love for their employees, their love for the people they work with, their love for the future of our community as well. And that idea of love and listening to understand, not to respond like I'm doing right now, is so, so important.
Because of that success and your success and inspiration, you've been chosen as the Wisdom Keepers for 2023. There's not much question that you both have had a lot of wisdom and you've chosen to share it with the community. So let me ask you each for a parting piece of that wisdom, if you would.
Giving our young people the voice and the platform. Not always reporting the bad things about them. Let's find the good things with them. That's where I'm at. And being selected as a Wisdom Keeper, when I received that email, I was so honored. And I at the time, I'm gonna be honest, I'm like saying, wow, I'm so honored. There's so many people before me, and I'm following their footsteps.
You're in good company.
Yes, I am. And when I found out, Stan, I'm right beside you, I was just honored, like, wow, wow.
Stan, what did you first think when they called you and told you you're a Wisdom Keeper?
My reaction when I first got that call was, I think you've got the wrong number. There are 400 some people I've interviewed over the years who have a lot more wisdom that should be heard from in our community. But I'm humbled, and I eventually was talked into accepting this, so I'll impart in whatever wisdom I might have. There's a couple things I think I'd like to say. It's important to give back to your community. Mary does that all day, every day, all year. And you know, that was something my parents believed in, give back to your community. And that's a cliche because it is true. It's important to give back. If I was going to give an insight into some wisdom, it might be kind, There's no price you have to pay for being kind. You can be kind and it will pay back in ways that you might never expect. Be patient. Don't be arrogant. You can be assertive without being arrogant. You can be assertive and still be kind if you're a leader. You want to have patience. You want to listen to understand, not to respond, as Mary has said. And finally, I think you just want to be accepting of other people. They have a story to tell, and if you allow them to tell you their story, you will begin to understand more about them and more about yourself as well.
Stan Lindhorst, Mary Nelson, congratulations and thank you for sharing your wisdom with everyone. And keep up the good work. God bless both of you.
We thank you.
Thank you, Dan. God bless you too, and God bless Mary Nelson.